Shada? Ms. Richards?
Yes, sir.
Yes. This is me. Okay. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shada Richards, Project Coordinator at the Mona Social Services and UWI Community Film Project, and your moderator for this afternoon's event. Thank you for joining us for our second and first regional symposium titled Becoming Agile: Lessons in Navigating a Global Pandemic. I am excited to get into the discourse, and I hope you are all ready for it as well. Without further delay, we will begin the forum with welcoming remarks from our Community Development and Program Manager, Miss Angela Harris. Miss Harris?
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Shada Richards, our moderator. To our esteemed panelists, our virtual viewers, those who are here in office, good afternoon. On behalf of the Executive Director, Dr. Olivine Burke, and the staff of the Mona Social Services UWI Community Film Project, I am so honored to be asked to welcome you to this, our regional symposium. I'm even more honored to be welcoming our esteemed panelists for taking the time out to be with us this afternoon. And of course, to you, our key stakeholders and partners who have also taken the time to be with us. For the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic have posed challenges to us as development practitioners within our own respective organizations. It has brought high levels of uncertainty as it relates to the operations of the organizations and the most effective ways to continue our modus operandi whilst ensuring that we carry out our mandates and our objectives. Government restrictions further pose additional limitations which affected the execution and implementation of various initiatives and projects within our organizations. As a result, we have had to reset, re-strategize our approaches whilst ensuring that our constituents, the one we serve, remain relevant and most importantly, accessible to our services. Resorting to the online or digital platform was our safe haven, as most of our projects had to be executed through that medium. This too had presented challenges, and of course, opportunities because we had to pivot as we became more creative and innovative. Overall, the pandemic highlighted areas, especially the need to reposition our operations while we remain relevant in this global shift. In light of this, the MSS UWCFP has engaged members of this panel, which include representatives from NGOs, social enterprises, civic organizations, and foundations to share their experiences and best practices they have been using to navigate this global pandemic. We will hear of lessons learned and opportunities to make the organizations more sustainable. I am so happy to hear the presentations. And I know that you two, our virtual audience, and those in the office are also more excited to hear the discussions that will follow after each presentation. And of course, we'll be going home learning more about us as civil organizations and NGOs and how we have had to pivot, change our approaches as we acclimatize ourselves to this changing climate. Again, welcome, welcome, and do enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you. Over to you now, Shata.
Thank you, Ms. Harris, for making our panelists and our audience feel welcome. I do hope that they all feel welcome at this time. I will now introduce all the panelists, after which they will give their presentations. Dean Chambers Goss. She is a workforce education and development specialist who has worked with several CSOs since 2007, helping to build capacity, forge partnerships, and improve communications with partners. She is a former resource mobilization specialist with CUSO International's National Volunteer Program and is the current executive director at the Rise Life Management Services. Also, we have Dr. Olivine Burke, who has been the executive director of the Mona Social Services, now Mona Social Services and Community Film Project, since 2011. She has combined her academic work to her passion for marginalized community development and utilized her skills as a lecturer in transformational leadership, strategic human resource management, learning strategies at the postgraduate level, to impact lives at the higher educational level. She has published books and has presented at a number of local and international academic conferences. She also sits on numerous private and public sector boards. Is a 2020 recipient of the Anthony Caribbean Award for excellence in public contribution. Also, she's also the recipient of the Vice Chancellor's Award for excellence in public contribution and the Governor General Achievement Award for achievements and leadership. From Belize, we have Ms. Sheena Zuniga. Ms. Zuniga serves as the Media Relations Officer of the Belize Network of NGOs, President of the National Garifuna Council of Belize, and a board member of the Belize Indigenous Council. She also works full-time at Marketing and Communications Department at the University of the Belize. Ms. Zuniga's experience includes being a graphic designer, curator of Gulisi Garifuna Museum, and logistics manager. She also works with the media, organizes press conferences, morning show appearances, and promotes the university and also assists the Institutional Advancement Office with event management and partnership agreements with stakeholders and other universities. She is a dedicated worker and goes beyond the call of duty to complete her task. She believes that it is in service that we truly find the meaning of life. It is her dream and aspirations to create a safe space for persons who have been affected by depression and sexual abuse by giving them a voice and resource levels to heal. From Trinidad and Tobago, we have Mr. Keron Bascom from Tech for Agri. Mr. Bascom is an agri-journalist, mobile content creator, and founder of Tech for Agri, a social enterprise based in Trinidad and Tobago that uses digital media, journalism, and communication services to support and inform and empower stakeholders in agriculture and related fields. Tech for Agri is the first entity to innovatively use mobile tech, media, and information sharing, being able to connect with ground level stakeholders as we seek to meet their development needs locally, within the Caribbean region, and internationally, as per the nature of our field. Tech for Agri has a solid foundation, having supported agri youth as a blog since 2011 and making the leap to social enterprise in 2014. After the creation of blog, Karan began volunteering for organizations such as plantwise.org and Global Agricultural Development Initiative. Soon, he began freelance work as a correspondent for Fresh Fruit Portal, CTA's Sport Magazine, and Ren Media. Through continued work as a social reporter for conferences such as GCRD2 and ICT4AG, both on site and remotely, he was able to improve his skills. Further complementing these field experiences, Karen sought out and earned field-based development opportunities with Online News Association and the International Federation of Agricultural Journalists. These experiences and more allowed Tech for Agri to offer services in social media, consultancy, development training, journalistic work, mobile video production, and facilitation services. Karen is also the alumni of the Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative Fellows, a professional development program by the US State Department. Karen aims to continue this advocacy work given the state of our post-COVID world in pursuit of equality in access to financial and other business services for small business owners and agripreneurs. He now serves on the Leadership Council for the Entrepreneurship Hub of Trinidad and Tobago to eliminate those barriers that prevent honest livelihood that he has chosen. Apart from his efforts with the social enterprise, Karen actively pursues over other entrepreneurial projects, Tech for Agri 360 and Agri Recovery Kit. Last but not least on our panel, we have Ms. Keon Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell has over 21 years experience in communications, spanning the tourism, bauxite, and alumina financial services sectors, as well as the telecommunications industry. As the Director of Communications for Flow Jamaica, she leads the company's internal and external communication strategy, as well as the stakeholder engagement program in Jamaica, and also supports the company's commercial drive. She is also the Executive Director of the Flow Foundation, and as such, also has oversight of its national development program, as well as its corporate social responsibility initiatives. Keon brings keen insight and expertise in the areas of strategic change management, communication, and reputation management, having successfully led several such initiatives throughout her career. Since joining Flow Jamaica, she has helped to shape the organization's reputation management program, especially around customer relationships and engagement, while driving enhanced communication support of its various initiatives. Kayan holds an executive MBA from Florida International University and a BA in Media and Communication from the University of the West Indies. She is a 2021 recipient of the Flair Distinguished for Media and Communications. Kayan is also a mentor in the mentorship program as well as an assessor of the master's program in integrated marketing communications at the University of the West Indies. The current president of International Association of Business Communications, the Caribbean chapter, Kayan has also served as the private sector representative on the National Technical Advisory Group of the UN Women's Win-Win Gender Equality Program. Ladies and gentlemen, these are your panelists, and now we will begin the presentations, starting with Dr. Olivine Burke of the Mona Social Services and UWI Community Film Project. Dr. Burke? Dr. Burke, if you're speaking, your mic is mute.
Having a little technical challenges, Shada. You probably want to take the next presenter or not?
Okay, no problem. Mrs. Chambers Goss?
Yes.
Presentation.
Sure. Let me start sharing. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, I am.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Richards. So, good afternoon, everyone. It really is a privilege to be asked to be a part of this panel this afternoon. I know, as Ms. Harris said, the CSO sector really had to go through quite a bit to try and adjust and acclimatize to the changes brought on by the global COVID-19 pandemic. And so with my presentation this afternoon, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea as to some of the services and projects offered by RISE and just a little taste of how we were impacted, kind of a pre and a post-COVID perspective then, before we enter into the more substantive discussions at the end of all of our presentations. As the addiction alert, and at the time it was the only and is still the only CSO to offer the first outpatient treatment services for addictive disorders, and these disorders pertain to either substance use or to gambling addiction. Currently, we're among the few CSOs in Jamaica that actually offer a 24-hour telephone counseling service. This is our lifeline. And just to add, prior to COVID, most of our calls would have dealt with substance use or issues pertaining to addiction. But post-COVID, what we realized was that we were getting a lot of calls from persons who had mental health crises and really needed our assistance. What RISE did even prior to COVID was continue to evolve and change, including our name change in 2005 from Addiction Alert to RISE, which is reaching individuals through skills and education. And this was deemed necessary just to really reflect the change in direction of our programs, which had at the time expanded and continues to expand to meet the changing needs of the vulnerable populations that we serve. And also because it kind of reflected more closely the commitment of the organization to working with our government and other CSO partners to contribute to our national development goals as encapsulated in our Vision 2030 plan. Now, RISE has been around for a lot, and we're proud, particularly of the impact that we've had, but we recognize that none of this would have been possible had we tried to do it alone. And so one of our guiding principles is that we are stronger together. And this, of course, pertains first and foremost to our CSO partners. And what we try to do to live up to this principle is provide capacity building for CSO partners, as well as support services and grants management. So, for example, the Mono Social Services and Community Film Project, just MSS at the time, would have benefited, for example, from one of the grants, the sub grants that RISE had offered as a way to get more CSO players involved in managing major EU projects. The other component of that guiding principle is to facilitate information sharing, information gathering, and the sharing of best practices. And again, this speaks to how closely we work with our CSO partners, having been charged in one of our projects, the Civil Society Boost Initiative, which was funded by the EU, to actually start a civil society network of Jamaica. And one of the key things that we're looking to do with that network or through that network of which we are a member is actually increase the amount of data that we are able to pass on to the Planning Institute of Jamaica. We currently do it now as a single entity, but we're looking to pool all the members of the network together so we can more accurately capture and, well, develop a tool to accurately capture what will be the social return on investment of the entire CSO sector. So that is something that we're particularly proud of and really looking forward to maturing. And finally, the third pillar of that is that we prioritize advocacy. Having been around for a while, we have a very good relationship with some of the major project donors. And what we do is we listen to the concerns of our CSO partners. And when we have the opportunity, we share those concerns with our donors so they can take into consideration what is actually happening on the ground and some of the changes that would help to make us even more impactful and certainly more resilient. Our main focus areas at RISE, I mean, we do and we continue to do a lot, but they really fall broadly under four main areas, which is our community-based services, where we offer a variety of programs in the community in which we reside, which is Parade Gardens, including what we like to consider our proactive response to the crime wave that is hitting Jamaica currently, which is through our after-school program, for example, as well as parenting workshops. Our other main area focuses on counseling and addiction prevention and treatment services. And as mentioned before, this is done in schools as well, both in the areas of gambling and substance use or substance misuse. Our next main area will be our workplace support services, because we recognize that a healthy private sector and public sector work environment will allow us to get the kind of support that we need through these various CSR programs to really continue to make an impact. And so we work with different entities providing confidential counseling services to their employees and to the spouses or children of these employees so that some of the issues that they might face at home do not spill over and impact their productivity on the job. We also, of course, do a lot of projects, donor-based projects, and that allows us to make an impact in a lot of new areas as well, including, for example, a project that we were recently awarded pertaining to improving forest management, and livelihood. So this is a new area for RISE, which our involvement with our donors facilitated. Now, in terms of projects, and as I said, we evolved really from being at our core addiction treatment and prevention to covering areas such as violence prevention and conflict resolution, offering training in life and social skills, working in the areas of human rights awareness and gender-based violence, as well as child trafficking. And of course, whatever we do pertaining to children and youths in our society, we try to ensure that we create that enabling environment at home by also delivering parenting workshops to improve the skills of our parents. Now, more specifically, now looking at that period just before COVID and since COVID, which is 2019 to 2021, we would have implemented about 9 projects for that period, reaching a total of 462,343 individuals. And this was accomplished through the variety of training which we would have accomplished. And as you can imagine, that would have also required us to go both virtual and hybrid. This would have also been achieved through the awareness building information that we disseminated over the period, including education packs, for example, that we would have distributed to schools as a part of our responsible gaming program and reducing gambling among adolescents through our MOU with the Ministry of Education, and counseling, our counseling services through our lifeline, and also through referrals from companies and from schools as well. Now, I'm not going to go too much into detail because I've been given a very tight timeline to present, but I did want to kind of share or present a little bit more specific information on some of the projects that we would have implemented. So we would have done an amplifying youth voices and action to address citizen security and safety through the UNDP, where RISE was called on to act as sort of a project management mentor and financial management mentor to these 10 youth groups. And this was a source of pride for us, you know, welcoming the next generation of players in the CSO sector and providing them with the guidance, especially during COVID, that they needed to ensure that their projects were implemented effectively and that they will be around to help us navigate now these trickier waters that we find ourselves in as we consider how to proceed with our community development in a relevant and meaningful way. There was also the St. Catherine Collaborative Project funded by USAID and FHI 360, which was a consortium essentially of CSOs, again, playing or demonstrating RISE's commitment to working closely with our partners, where we mounted an intervention for youths assessed as either being medium or at high risk of involvement in crime and violence in St. Catherine. We also were involved in a gender-based violence school-based program through UNICEF. And this, we had to get very creative in terms of making sure we got the students fully engaged online. We came up with creative ways to get them to fully participate through our gender-based violence jingle competition. And we got some very good entries, which I'm happy to say, you know, really impressed our donors and made a difference to the youths as well. With regards to our telephone lifeline, this is supported by the Ministry of Health. As I said, you know, there really is a rise in the instances of mental crises that we're experiencing post-COVID. Well, in the COVID period and post-COVID. And why I highlighted that section is because everything that we try to do at RISE, and certainly what helped us to navigate this space, was that we rely a lot on the data analysis, and using the evidence of what is happening to kind of direct changes in our programs and the development of new interventions as well. So for example, we see here that for all the calls that we would have gotten for that period, 36.1% of them would have been for substance use issues, while 24.1% would have been for mental health. And there are other indicators that we watch as well, but it really just speaks to how much we value data and how we saw that as being critical to guide us through the COVID period. Our next project had to do with the outpatient substance use disorder treatment and prevention program, which is funded by the Chase Fund. And this, we had to get very creative towards the end of the year and actually deliver both face-to-face and virtual sessions at both the primary and the secondary levels, because we realized that there was an issue developing within the schools, and we were intent that we would find a way to reach them. And so, having established a partnership for underage gambling, to address underage gambling in the schools with the Ministry of Education, we were able to have a little leeway to go in and really train the guidance counselors who really were not fully or very thoroughly exposed to the issue of substance use disorder and the challenges that were presenting themselves with the students. So that was a very, very useful project during this COVID period for us, and something we're hoping to continue in this semi-post COVID period. Our next project was the Civil Society Boost Initiative funded by the European Union, which I had alluded to before, and it really is getting CSOs to work together, providing them with training in areas such as how to diversify, for example, their funding sources, how to more effectively manage their financial reporting, how to build partnerships, all of these things that would have contributed to them being a little bit more resilient during the COVID period and beyond. We also noticed during COVID, and we're fortunate enough to be a part of a project staged by the US Department of State, Winrock International, and the government of Jamaica pertaining to child trafficking and the issue of child labor. And really, this was to help us to sensitize persons, especially school communities and neighbors, community groups, of the risk of children being brought into trafficking and also being forced into child labor, really by just vulnerable parents and vulnerable households, and providing them with information on resources and also helping the parents themselves know to find options in terms of income generation so that the children would not fall victim. They could properly take care of them by generating a more substantial alternative form of livelihood for themselves. Next, we had our support for the National HIV/AIDS Response, which was funded by Global Funds. And again, this really came out of RISE's involvement and on-the-ground work with a number of persons in this vulnerable community. And so we assisted just to get the message out quite quickly in terms of HIV prevention, and also providing educational support and safe sex material, including condoms, to the female sex workers so that we would not have another serious issue emerging out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, all of this, of course, apart from the donors that would have been mentioned as a part of that section, we also were fortunate enough to have a few other partners as listed here, and these are long-standing partners of RISE, and every NGO or every CSO entity needs to cultivate these long-term relationships. And for example, with the Separate Foundation and Mussins Foundation, this is a relationship that is long-standing at RISE that goes beyond financial contribution. You know, they're always in our corner motivating us. How can we become more dynamic? And it forces us to remain relevant, which is a word I heard Ms. Harris mention several times. And of course, we have to point out our relationship, or more than about 15-year relationship with the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission, who recognize RISE's work in the field and actually rely on us as a partner to develop policies to ensure that we have a responsible gaming environment here in Jamaica. And so even during the COVID pandemic, the BGLC, in partnership with RISE, actually commissioned a study to once again gain valuable data with the study focusing on adult gambling in Jamaica. And it really was a first of its kind research in Jamaica, which provided now relevant data that can be used to guide strategies and further policies for the gaming industry. And of course, there is CB Foundation, another long-term supporter of RISE, and beyond just financial, also in terms of guidance. So we're very pleased to have both our CSO partners and our partners from the donor community, the government, and of course, private sector. Now, despite all that support, we still did experience quite a bit of hitback from the COVID-19. So for example, and I'm not going to go into detail because I know that we're going to be discussing these in depth. So for example, what we had experienced were a number of project delays or postponements. We were also confronted by quite a bit more no-cost extensions, which is where project timelines were extended, but then there were no additions made to the original budget. And of course, as everyone would have had to do, we also had to adapt very, very quickly to online and hybrid modalities in terms of delivering our interventions. And so what this saw us doing was re-engineering our training material, because then we had to be mindful that, you know, the attention spans of persons were different. We were no longer there to see and observe the body language and be able to modify accordingly. So we had to optimize and make that training material as friendly and as engaging as possible for our audience, and really cut it down so it could be delivered in bite-sized bits as well, so that it would be retained. We also had to divert certain areas of our budget and put focus on creating videos and animations. And this was especially important when we were dealing with our youths and our younger constituents, or members of our younger populations at the primary and secondary level. So here is a photo of this is actually one from our parenting college. And so pre-COVID, we had crowds like this, gathered like this, close to each other, to listen and to share in our sessions. And of course, now post-COVID, and I'm certain many of you might be familiar with this kind of screen, we had to move things online. And so now the norm was everybody in their mask and where they were together as best as possible to ensure a bit of physical distance, to make sure that persons were safe when we could do those face-to-face interventions. And so the mask here really do typify what COVID meant for many of us as civil society organizations, which is a whole change in our daily operations. So it ushered in a new reality. It forced us to look at new ways of operating and really inspired a sense of urgency, certainly within RISE and among the majority of our CSO partners, in terms of what we could do to make sure that we were sustainable and continued to be relevant and deliver meaningful and impactful programs to our beneficiaries, to our communities. And the plus side from all of that, though, the good from COVID, is that it helped to create, I firmly believe, a more resilient and agile CSO sector, which I'm looking forward to us discussing in even greater details today, in terms of some of the tips, some of what we had to do to really, well, even to be here today. So I want to thank you very much for your time. Hope the information was useful, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my fellow panelists.
All right, thank you for that presentation, Ms. Goss. Now we will have Ms. Sheena Zuniga from the Belize Network of NGOs with her presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give an overview of the organizations I currently work with which are Belize Network of NGOs, and the National Garifuna Council. My presentation will focus more on National Garifuna Council since we've managed numerous projects pre and during COVID. The Belize Network of NGO is a network of non-governmental organizations in Belize. We have diverse membership at various stages of development and levels of needs. As a network, BNN seeks to create good governance through avenues such as advocacy, position statements, and representation. The Belize Network of NGOs is led by a steering committee, which is elected from among the NGO members in good standing. These good standing members also elect the person who represents them in the Senate. BNN represents a cadre of organizations ranging from social conservation to cultural organizations. We currently don't have any ongoing projects, but due to COVID, majority of our meetings have been held virtually. In addition, I am also the president of National Garifuna Council. NGC is a non-governmental organization dedicated to the preservation of Garifuna culture and the advancement of the Garifuna people in Belize. NGC has experienced considerable evolution over the course of its 40-year history in an effort to continue addressing issues that impact Garinagu in Belize. National Garifuna Council advocates for and secure the rights, development, and culture of the Garifuna people in Belize, while promoting economic sustainability, interracial harmony, and maintaining traditional respect for the preservation of the environment. NGC currently has 12 branches in the country of Belize. Before and during COVID pandemic, NGC was engaged in implementing 5 projects. These include the following that I will be discussing. Our first project was empowerment of the National Garifuna Council towards landscape and seascape stewardship. This project is funded by GEF Small Grants Program. The final deliverable of this project was maps of lands traditionally occupied and used by Garinagu, specifically in the 6 Garifuna communities in southern Belize. NGC has also done education and awareness sessions with the communities, which focus on general land rights, such as letters of administration to claim land initially owned by deceased relatives, applying for lease and title land, and ways to protect the land. At the end of the project, a map for each of the 6 communities will show where the boundaries were and where the current limits are, and will serve as necessary input in the effort to secure Garifuna land rights in Belize. The second project that we focused on was food sovereignty for the Garifuna people in Belize. This project was funded by Cultural Survival Keepers of the Earth, which aims to reconnect the Garifuna people with nature and the land by promoting traditional Garifuna food. This led to a healthy community eating the food they plant. This project supports backyard gardening by women and youths within the Garifuna communities, and trainings on how to prepare land, maintenance and care of plants, accounting for the cost and pricing of products. The project provides support for planting of root crops, including bitter cassava, sweet cassava, yam, and coconut, as well as vegetables such as herbs and traditional medicinal plants. We have plans for a nursery and a small-scale agro-processing to be done on a property owned by NGC. The COVID-19 pandemic has compounded and challenges these communities face as it relates to food security. Therefore, this project made major contribution to the well-being and health of the community members in this regard. The third project we managed was support the territories prioritized in the Central American Strategy of Territorial Rural Development, ICADERC. The focus of this quota project is on food security in the Garifuna communities. This project assisted with seedlings and transplanting crops already planted under the Cultural Survival Funded project. Some seedlings and small farming equipment were purchased to help the farmers. Ministry of Agriculture of Belize conducted training sessions to update farming techniques and timing adjusting to climate change that has caused the change in cultivating some climate sensitive crops. Technical support was offered to the farmers by the technical coordinator hired under the Kotak project and assistance by Ministry of Agriculture. Participants in these projects were taught how to set up and maintain their own vegetable gardens, for example, root tubers, vegetables, and fruits, which were included in the gardens. The plants that are the mainstays of the Garifuna diet, which will be most abundant. This will not only improve the health and the diet of these families, but it also empowered them by putting them in control of their food security and providing them with the means to generate additional income. Our fourth project that we managed, strengthening the institutional capacity of Belize's indigenous peoples to promote gender equality and eliminate violence against indigenous people. The Spotlight Initiative funds this project. This was being implemented by NGC for the benefit of the Belize National Indigenous Council. The project aimed to establish a solid coordinated network among the indigenous groups in Belize so that they may advocate, lobby, and work towards shared goals, including national policy, gender equality, and rights protection mechanism. The main objectives are to support the institutional strengthening of BENIC, to improve the ability to better advocate and navigate government institutions, and strengthening Indigenous women's capacity to address matters relating to ending violence against women and girls. The last project that we were working with, strengthening the indigenous peoples of Belize, national participation in landscape stewardship. This project was funded by the GEF SGP Small Grants Program. It aims to garner the protection of critical landscapes where Indigenous people of Belize are found through capacity building and exchange sharing of Indigenous traditional knowledge. The main objectives are to support the institutional strengthening of BENIC, enable BENIC to implement environmental awareness outreach, and share COVID-19 and other related information in Indigenous languages. During the pandemic peak period, our project team were unable to meet with beneficiaries, causing some activities to be delayed. We had to do extensions to most of our project deadlines. We've had issues with reaching out to our communities. So most of our sessions had to be held using social media and have virtual sessions. That's what we used to conduct most of our trainings. Following that, as the restriction changed, sessions were modified to accommodate smaller groups of participants, and less time was spent within the communities due to the curfew restrictions. We've had to change what we do in our programs that relate on face-to-face meetings to online. And we have had to reduce the number of participants in our face-to-face sessions, which became more costly because we would have to then have 3 meetings versus 1 meeting to break up our different groups. Most of our funding requires that we have workshops. It was hard for us to be able to facilitate these workshops due to the restrictions. Those were some of the things that we engaged in during COVID-19. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Zuniga. And now we have Mr. Bascom from Trinidad and Tobago for Tech for Agri.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Morning, everyone. Hope all is well. So I didn't have a full-on presentation, but I do have my points and the videos that I would like to show. So just to quickly recap, I run Tech for Agri, which is a social enterprise where we use media journalism and communications to support the agriculture sector. We advocate for young persons in the sector, and our goal is to make sure our services are in support of these communities, the agri stakeholders and other agro-allied fields like climate change and the environment. So I did look over the questions that were asked for all the panelists, and I just made some points, and I have my examples that I will show you via Zoom here. So it asks, what outlook and strategies have we employed or have we noticed? And in our sector, we are clearly seeing the need for agricultural knowledge and the obvious need for digital media. Digital transformation is now that one of those hot buzzwords, but that doesn't mean as if, some entities know exactly what they're doing. You really have to engage with the practitioners of the field who have been doing communications, who have been using digital since prior to COVID. Just because it's new for a lot of persons now doesn't mean it wasn't functioning before. So what we need to realize is that it is still going to take years before our region is fully digitally transformed, meaning everyone capable of using electronics and all sorts of different devices, and to say have technology be a completely regular part of their lives in other ways apart from, let's say, a cell phone. But we have 4 economies here, and so always talk about innovations, but there's still a lack of support, especially for smaller entities. And I know that some CSOs can definitely understand that. So we at Tech for Agri decided to create our own revenue streams by doing our own mobile media productions. So we had services, and we still do have services in mobile video production, facilitation services, social media consultancy, journalistic work, etc. And we decided, okay, we are going to create our own content for TV and online, because we've created content for online before. So we're going to create our own little series that is going to show people where the merger of agriculture and digital needs to happen. And we were able to do well with it in that we got it aired on local television here on TTT, which is one of the first and oldest TV stations. And that is actually still airing. It's still happening. That kind of shows you we are sort of in the right direction. There is that need for digital media, locally based content, but the structure of the avenue to really progress those types of things are not there. So I'll just play one of the episodes. I'm assuming that you can see my screen there. Share audio.
Yes, we're seeing your screen, Karen. We're not hearing though, Karen. We're seeing, not hearing.
Are you not hearing? It says, what do you call it? Share audio. It says that it's happening on my end. Let me see if I can get it. Still not hearing?
No, I'm not hearing. No, not hearing. We just see.
Oh, I'm not too sure because I don't know if you can see me. There's a little option on the bottom left that says share audio and it's on. So I'm not sure how to resolve that situation right now. Let's see.
Right. If the videos are not working, Karen, just give a quick overview of
Okay.
Tech Agri and what you have been doing. And so, because time is going and we need to get into the discussion. Okay, it seems that we have lost Karen. I'm not sure what's happening with his connection. Oh, he seems to be back. Karen, are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. I'm not sure what happened, but I just hopefully changed my location a bit. Maybe I can just, while I discuss my points, you can at least have the images of the video in the background. So let me click to play. Yeah.
First case of COVID-19, panic mode. Long lines formed outside Price Mart.
Flights will no longer be allowed. Effects of COVID-19 on food continues to depend on imports.
Still not hearing?
We're hearing now. We're hearing now.
Oh, you're hearing now? Okay.
So how the person and buy meat and fish?
My name is Curtis Carby. I live at Dover in South Airport. My business is Carby Sausages. We specialize in satisfying the local market with fresh green leafy vegetables at affordable price. So I'll say throughout this whole COVID situation, for me, the virus had made both a positive and a negative impact in the farming industry. The farmers, the local farmers, they do not have to compete with the import market, seeing that less imported goods or no imported goods will be brought into the country. The local farmers now have a chance to start and feed their country without competition. Another thing is that they would get more value for their product. Let's use like example tomatoes. Right now tomatoes is $10 a pound, $8 and $9 a pound. And reason being is because less imported tomato is coming into the country, so that is why now the local farmers would now get price for their product. Farmers who deal, I'll say, directly with the groceries would more benefit from this, because farmers who look solely at wholesale market, like say Mokoya wholesale market, with the new marketing policies now, is that I think people may feel safer going to the groceries to shop than the market, because I think that the grocery may have a more plan put in place to to help with, let's say, hygiene and when it comes to, to sanitation and stuff like that. At South Repuch, this is a village known for fishing and farming. So the farmers here, I'll say we form like a body. It's like we work as one. We support each other in all ways, marketing ways. I'll say crop maintenance ways. It's like I'll say that we have a togetherness, and our aim is to satisfy the country, to feed the country. I seen at least 20 to 25 increase in my production so far because, as I said, I deal directly with groceries. I've talked to other farmers who deal directly with market, wholesale market and stuff like that, and where they have seen drop in their production because I say due to the new marketing policies is that they kind of have problems with getting the surplus out of their hand.
Can you tell me a bit about how your farming has been going during this current COVID-19 situation?
Okay, I try.
Okay, so all right. So I hope you all enjoyed that. It was a bit longer than I remembered it being, but I hope that I still have your attention. So that was what we did. We primarily started saying, okay, we'll create our own media programs and get the sponsorship ourselves. We got very, very small sponsors and we were able to have this series. And we are seeing that as a new revenue stream because we are the small creators that are producing the content that's actually in demand. What we also did was focus on our international partnerships. Any organization or entity is free and at liberty to network with whoever they feel free to do so with. And now that we are forced to be connected digitally, you have the option to engage with persons outside of the international, outside of the Caribbean community. And this for me as a small entity is a great way to escape corrupted and like I don't like to engage with anybody who is, for lack of a better word, taking advantage of the citizens and the communities that we are supposed to be servicing. So it's a good opportunity for me to be and remain independent and not be, an entity that is in any way dependent on any government or private structure. So we are able to really always look at the real issues from an unbiased point of view. Along with some of the challenges we had was or faced during the pandemic and the after effects and all of it was coming across a limited capability level within the workforce. You would call, a TV station and to have the sales manager ready to break down in tears because they feel like they have so much work and they're working remotely and they know how to function. It was just a lot, especially for somebody like myself who has over 10 years of digital agriculture experience, so blogging and doing these types of online work, online, even administrative work, is something we're very familiar with. And it seems to be a real challenge within our workforce, making the whole digital transformation process a nightmare. But as I said earlier, that is going to be a 10, 15-year process because change is happening whether the workforce admits it or not. And then we have the general disarray of the agri sector where there's a lot of structural issues, entities are missing, authorities are missing, things just don't function as they should. And that makes it difficult to keep up with schedules, which are now affected because of the COVID. So priorities have changed. People are looking to improve their education levels. They are looking to get additional revenue streams. So finding time to do a video, they don't understand, but they do recognize that there is a need for the digital. So finding time to do that video, I have to kind of push and pressure for because it's the reality. It's part of how we have to communicate now. When it comes to changes or redirection, we definitely, as I mentioned earlier, we focus on our long-term partnerships. So we directly went to the International Federation of Agri-Journalists. Prior to COVID, we were already engaging with them to kind of start pushing our fields in the region. And despite the COVID, we have actually just submitted our application to be members, and we are pushing forward to say, well, let's have agri-journalism and communications, or science journalism, climate change journalism, environmental journalism as a field that young persons can get into, as apart from the usual fields and options that we have in our region. And these long-term partnerships allow us to have stability and progress and try to progress our innovation. We narrow down our services and really just primarily focus on mobile video production and our own media productions. So I do have another video to play. This one is 1 minute, much shorter. So it can show where we have grown from our rise of agriculture, from our initial work with the series on television. The longer version called Rise of Agriculture. This one has a whole lot more production value, but we have to take our time and do it because we're limited in our resources.
2021 has brought challenges that our world, our region, and our communities have never experienced before. As we all continue to recover and adapt to our new age, a strategy of collaboration cross-cutting sectors among all our value chain actors is paramount. Join us as we take you on a journey towards safe food for T&T.
Okay, so you in Jamaica should be familiar with agri-TV shows because I saw Farm Chicks on Instagram. I haven't been able to watch the whole thing, but I thought it looked interesting. And so yes, continuing with the presentation, when it comes to mental health concerns, I was happy to hear all of what's happening from the last presenters' activities. I myself really had to take that into consideration and actually inform the stakeholders that I'm working with that we have to take it easy and take it one step at a time. It has been frustrating for them because they have given up their money, but I am aware of mental health being something that we must be aware of. And so I decided I am not going to force or rush anything for the sake of finishing on a timeline when things are not appropriately in place. So we've taken the time to say, okay, we want to do our work, let's take our time and do it. I assure you, I have to go with basically our reputation that we will complete this work. And it helps us because we are very determined to do so. And so every little piece of work that we do towards the project, we put it on our Instagram, we put it out online in some kind of form. That way there's a literal record of your consistency and our dedication to kind of finish our projects and get them completed. And what we have, sorry,
I'm sorry.
time?
Yeah, you're out of time for the presentation and we need to get to the other presenters so we can get to the discussion. So thank you for that. We'll save the rest for the discussion. Miss Mitchell, I know you are ready and waiting. And please go ahead with your presentation.
All right, let me just confirm that you are seeing my screen.
Yes.
So, all right, great. Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists, and thank you, Madam Moderator. It is my pleasure to be here to share a bit about the work that we've been doing at the Flow Foundation, and in particular, share with respect to the topic for today in terms of how we would have navigated through this pandemic with our programs and so on. So I'm going to go through quickly. I know that time is of the essence, and I'll really try to stick to the time frame that was assigned. Let me first start by introducing the Flow Foundation for those persons who may not be familiar with us. Flow Foundation was established in 2004. It's the philanthropic arm, if you will, of our Flow Jamaica business. And our Flow Jamaica business is part of a larger global group. We are a part of the Liberty Latin America family, and our LLA group has operations in Latin America and across the Caribbean region. So for us here in Jamaica, our efforts in this space are supported by our business Flow Jamaica, as well as our other commercial brands, C&W Business Jamaica and Flow Business Jamaica. Between 2004 through to 2020, we would have been focused really on connecting communities and transforming lives. That was our main focus. We would have executed a lot of projects, scores of projects and programs over that period, impacting tens of thousands of lives. And of course, we would have been recognized for the work that we were doing in that space. During that time, our focus was really on bridging the technology divide, education, youth and community, and environmental responsibility. I want to highlight that you are going to be seeing some videos in my presentation. You will not hear any sound. I am allowing them to play in the background so you can see a little bit of what I'm talking about while I explain what we've been doing. So in 2020, I mean, we're now in 2022 and this stops at 2020, and you're probably wondering, so what happened to the other 2 years? Having been focused on this wider landscape over those 16 years, in 2019, we decided to take a look at the work of the Flow Foundation. What are the spaces that we're in? Where are we having the impact? Where can we move to make an even bigger difference in the lives of Jamaicans? So we would have had research done that would have informed our direction. And in 2019, we started designing the program that we wanted for our market, for Jamaica. That would have led us to 4 key pillars under which our CSR activities would be executed: learning, environment, access, and disaster relief. For our purpose here in Jamaica, and I should highlight that this is really across the Liberty Latin America group. For our purpose in Jamaica, we focused on learning and access in particular. While we were working through that program and getting ready to launch, so we're coming through to the end of 2019, heading into 2020, getting ready to launch and roll out this new direction, this new focus, and what it would mean in terms of how we engage with our communities, the pandemic happened. So we had to have a shift, we had to adjust and make some tweaks to the program in light of where we were. And so since August 2020, our focus has been on enabling progress through digital inclusion. We're focused on building that inclusive digital future for all Jamaicans. We're doing that through training, through connectivity in communities. We're also looking at how we boost the capacity of entrepreneurs in communities and also supporting and driving a sort of paid forward mindset. So as we provide the assistance to you, we expect and we ask that you also pay it forward by sharing with persons in your community, helping them along the path as we look to empower more Jamaicans throughout this program. So this is really a national development shift for us. We have our CSR initiatives that we do, but this is about building national capacity. And it indicates there that we're looking at 2 main pillars, our digital training and also focusing on MSMEs. Under our digital training program, which we rolled out at the beginning of 2021, we have our Skills for the Future program. This is one of our main initiatives. And this program in particular, as you're seeing on the screen, we have 5 main modules. There are persons in this program who have come on. They are not very familiar with the internet space. And so you'll note some of the modules they're learning about, the courses learning about the internet, how to use the web, personal security, and so on in the online space, all of which are geared towards supporting persons in this space, empowering them so they can navigate the space safely and securely. And when you continue through the program, it can take you through to learning, to income generating opportunities. Our second program is our Training for Professionals program. And under this program, we're looking at persons who were displaced by the pandemic, persons who perhaps would have lost their jobs or they're working reduced hours. How do we ensure that instead of just sitting at home while they're looking for that other opportunity, they can still boost their capacity? So they're able to access training via the top publishers in the world, get certified, make themselves more employable, make themselves also more attractive to other opportunities. And for those persons looking at, going out on their own, this also validates that they have some knowledge of the space that they're in. So that's the umbrella overview of the two programs that we rolled out in the pandemic. So let me tell you a little bit more about the performance of these programs so far. This is really a pilot program for us. This is the first time we're in this space, and we have had to continuously evaluate, adjust, adapt, make the necessary shifts. As you know, throughout the pandemic, we've been under various protocol measures to guarantee or help safeguard our health and safety. So as those measures have been coming out, as they've been impacting our participants, we've had to make the adjustments to ensure that we are still supporting them. And you would have heard from some of our previous presenters in terms of not being able to do the face-to-face engagement anymore and what that meant when you moved into the online space. And I'll tell you, for us, that was a major impact for us. The program, when we designed it, was really meant for us to execute it face-to-face, particularly the Skills for the Future program. We were moving into the online space. Persons who were not very familiar with technology were learning how to use this technology via tablets, phones, etc. So as they are learning about the thing, they're using the very tool that they're learning about to access the training. But we had over close to 7,000 applicants for that Skills for the Future program. We are topped out in terms of how many persons we can onboard in each round. We are now at over 2,000 persons engaged in training. Over 550 have completed the full program. We have 5 partnerships spanning different communities: Treasure Beach, Spring Village. We're looking at working with Central Village. We have schools on the program as well, organizations. So we have several partnerships in the space that pretty much they're coming together as their own communities to empower themselves, to get their training, empower their young people, move them onto something more productive. For our Skills Training for Professionals program, oversubscribed as well, over 13,000 applicants. And our top 5 courses so far, as you're seeing there, HR, project management, leadership, accounting, information technology. We have over 2,300 persons in training now, over 14,000 courses completed. Persons are just moving through their program. They log on, they identify their course of study, and they move on. And what we're seeing is this real, I would say, this zest to learn. Jamaicans want to empower themselves. They want to learn. They want to be put in a position where they can better take care of themselves and their families. They want to progress. And so as we navigate through this pilot program, we're making the necessary adjustments to support them to success. We We have facilitators in our Skills for the Future program. We also have other support strategies in our Training for Professionals program. The Skills for the Future program has the facilitators. And then there's the question of what next. After the training, if I'm not in a job or if I want to move on to something else, what next? This is where the Hive comes in. And the Hive, as you're seeing here, we have over 50,000 persons registered now on this platform, which is really the first platform bringing together freelancers and MSMEs with employers. So if you're unemployed, or even if you're employed, you can go on, you can register, indicate your areas of expertise. Employers can come on, they can post projects, you can bid for those projects. And it's bringing those two communities together in a meaningful way that allows persons to earn some additional income. I won't go through everything here. You have seen the top 10 countries, Jamaica at the top, the professions there, mostly in the IT space, and then you have, like the digital marketing space. But the Hive continues to grow as Jamaicans are looking for that opportunity. We had other major programs that we had to roll out during the program. Our tablet distribution partnership, where we're providing tablets free of cost in partnership with other organizations, preloaded with data. It's an initiative for the time. Students were home, no access to devices. How could we make a difference there? Our Internet in Schools program, also providing that connectivity at the schools. Over 250 schools were upgraded to the best technology and fastest speeds. As we identified that even though schools were closed, students were learning from home. The teachers, the administrators were still going to the school to execute the lessons and so on. So we were providing support in that space. Bridging the technology divide, the digital divide, continuing to provide even more connectivity at schools, at different community sites, places of learning, places where people naturally gather to conduct their online engagement, if not at home. And we did this in tandem with our business. Under our business, we connected over 500 communities to the online space. And so we were able to layer on top of that by identifying some strategic locations across the country and providing that additional Wi-Fi support for persons in those communities that facilitated ways and means of them to get online, pursue studies, do their business, etc., and enable their progress. And of course, there are institutions and facilities like the KPH that also would have been upgraded. But while we're in that space, we also had a core responsibility of, the space we're in, we're always very mindful of keeping persons safe. And so we continued with our Safer Internet Week initiative, specifically for teens, seniors, pre-teens. We would have conducted sessions over the course of a week last year as well as this year. That what I'm showing here are just the stats and some snippets from the execution this year. But that has always been at the forefront of the programs that we're rolling out to ensure that as we're bringing more persons into the online space, we are focused on sharing best practices of keeping safe. And if it is that you find yourself in a situation where you are being bullied or compromised, how do you get help? How do you raise that conversation without being fearful? So as I close, I want to just highlight some learnings that we took out of this program. The COVID-19 impact, we had to reset and redesign. Even though this program was in the works before, coming out of the research, Jamaicans want to progress, they want a better future for themselves, they want opportunities to upgrade their skills so they can earn more. Those were some of the research findings that led to this program. But we had to adjust. We couldn't do it face-to-face anymore. Were we going to put the program on hold or were we going to jump into the online space, figure it out as we go, adjust and support? That was critical for us. The online execution, as I mentioned, it wasn't easy. When you're dealing with persons participating in the program with 2 devices in a household, 6 persons for 2 devices, how could we ease that sort of pressure? The connectivity, we would have ramped up to provide connectivity to over 500 communities, but we had to do more. So we had the community Wi-Fi hotspots that we had to layer on top of that. But we still had to treat with competing priorities. We had work from home happening at the same time as online learning for students. And for a lot of the participants, we heard they could only get online after they did the work, after they dealt with the kids, you know, late evenings, that's when they were going online to try to do their training program and so on. So how could we support them? And that's where, you know, the facilitators who checked in on them, helped them through that, ensure there were no roadblocks. That's where they came in. The gamification provided further incentives for those in the training for professional program. And there were other opportunities to incentivize them through to completion. The lessons we learned: research is critical. Your programs have to be informed by the data. Otherwise, you will not have the impact that you're looking for. The dialogue and the engagement. Having gotten the information, you can't just go and design a program in isolation. Speak with your stakeholders, get their inputs, find out where there are opportunities for collaboration, and how can you leverage that into a more robust program. Business alignment was critical for us. We are part of a multinational group, a global group, and it was important for us that we had a program that would allow us to build on top of what was happening in our space. So as we're bringing the connectivity into the communities, how can we empower those citizens, communities that never had connectivity before? How could we provide them with that support? Ensure that, yes, we're bringing it into your community, but it's not just for entertainment and social media and all of that. How can you earn income, position yourself to earn additional income by being online, and so on? Partnerships are critical. We have great partners in the Mona School of Business through the Caribbean School of Data, one-on-one educational services, and Ingenuity Technologies. Great partners for us for our pilot program. And then there's flexibility and agility. We have to be ready to respond to the changing environment. We have to be ready to be agile. We have to be nimble in order to ensure that the program does not remain static. The program has to grow. It has to be molded into the best fit for your target audience, your target communities at that point in time. So that, in a nutshell, for us is a snapshot of our program and our experiences through the pandemic. I also want to share, I'm not sure if I had said it earlier, that all of these programs are free of cost, by the way, fully funded by the Flow Foundation and open to Jamaicans. Well, right now we have had to close because we're oversubscribed and we're getting these current participants through, but all of these Jamaicans are being certified free of cost as a result of the financing through the Flow Foundation, which came through our parent foundations, Cable and Wireless Charitable Foundation, and our business, Flow Jamaica. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mitchell. We'll move to our next presenter, Dr. Olivine Burke of Mona Social Services. And after that, we will get into the panel discussion. Dr. Burke.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me share with you this afternoon on the Mona Social Services, what we are doing in terms of becoming agile and the lessons that we have learned in navigating community development during this notorious global pandemic. So I'll first start with a definition of community development. You know, researchers. It's basically for us a process where community members are supported by agencies like us to identify and take collective action on issues which are important to them. Now, who are we? The Mona Social Services. By way of background, MSS UWI-CFP is the civic engagement and outreach arm of UWI. We started back in 2006 as a project called the UWI Township Project. And then in 2008, we were established formally as the Mona Social Services. Now, by 2020, based on all that we have been doing in community engagement, we merged with the UWI-CFP to become, and we are now known as the Mona Social Services UWI Community Film Project. That's where the CFP comes in. Now, what is the vision and the mission that drive what we do? So our vision is to transform the Mona Valley initially, because that's where we started, just the communities that surround the campus, but then we extended. So we are now looking at transforming Mona Valley and other communities into Vision 2030, which is a place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. And the mission that we are on is, as the UWI, as a university, we are poised to lead the social and economic transformation of underserved communities within these inner cities communities, and we do so through research, knowledge creation, and of course, very importantly, community engagement. Now we look at the link between community development and MSS UWI-CFP. MSS engages in projects, initiatives, various activities aimed at impacting lives. That's what we do. And where the community is concerned, at the community level, community development initiatives, the initiatives that we work on are aimed at attaining long-term goals. And these long-term goals will be evidenced by the changes in the social capital and the civic engagement that we are all seeing and experiencing some of. Now, what community development means to us ultimately is, firstly, transformational leadership. What that means is that as a university surrounded by marginalized communities, part of our mission is to lead in the provision of knowledge and the transformation of lives. And you will see a little afterwards, later in the presentation, how we lead in the transformation of knowledge. Then for community development, we look at removing barriers for these marginalized groups. And how do we do so? Various means. We provide marginalized students with access to tertiary education, and this access prepares them to contribute meaningfully to society as engaged and productive citizens and leaders. Another thing that community development means to us is research and innovation. Through conducting research and sharing its findings of highest quality, that helps us to seek to answer the questions and to create, along with stakeholders and collaborators, create solutions to these issues, concerns, and problems that we find box us in every day. And also in community development, developing communities, we're also looking at holistic human development. What do I mean by that? providing engagement and economic development, as well as capacity building and skills development for all persons. Now, I've heard a number of my presenters talk a lot on, the various skills development that they have been doing in their communities. So we are basically operating, say, about 12 years. And what have we achieved thus far? We started in 5 communities. Now we have actually impacted and gone and worked in over 58 communities. And these communities are stretched across 8 parishes thus far. And so we have completed over 150 projects. Now, these projects cost a lot of investment for the university, but we think that it is very, very important in terms of transforming our communities and transforming lives. So we have spent approximately $70 million. And I mean, these days, $70 million is almost like a drop in the bucket, and it really is. And through that $70 million, we have impacted approximately 10,000 persons from these communities directly, and by extension, another 40,000. How do we do this? What is our strategy? We use our 6-pillar approach to community development. This six-pillar approach is holistic in its presentation. We look at education, entrepreneurship, crime and violence reduction, health, sports and culture, as well as peace. We recognize from our experience that we could not do one area without the other, because if you target crime and violence only, then what you will find is that other areas like education, in fact, when you look at education and providing entrepreneurial and employability opportunities, then you are directly trying also to nip crime and violence in the bud. So what are some of the projects and initiatives that MSS MSS UWI has been working on? You hear me mention education, which is one of the pillars, yes? And here we have just a fraction of the number of scholars from these, well, let me not say scholars, all of these persons are now graduates of the UWI, MSS UWI UWI Township Scholarship Program. In this program, we actually provide tuition free for all our persons from the inner city communities to access the university free of cost for their tuition. And not only that, we also look at their total personal development, personal engagement, etc., because resources needed much more than just monetary resources. Then this is a picture of skills training. One of the skills training we do is film training, and we have impacted many persons, yes, through skills training. Then I should have said the film project. We merged with the film project. In fact, the film project is celebrating its 10th year this year, and the number of persons we have impacted, it is, the numbers have just blown everybody over by surprise. And even during COVID, we still had our film projects. Then we have other training, has to do with community development, small business, employability training. And out of these training, persons have developed their own small business in jewelry, cake making, cushions, etc., you name them. We also have parenting empowerment session, because part of what we have found in our research, and of course, I guess a number of persons on our platform may be able to attest to the fact that one of the serious challenges that we are facing today is poor parenting, much of which has given rise to some of the issues and challenges that we are experiencing. So we have done a lot of empowerment training sessions in being effective parenting. We have also introduced more than 100 social workers we have trained, I should say, more than 100 social workers and placed them in the various communities, not only in Kingston, but also in Montego Bay, because we recognize that the number of social workers that were provided in the communities by the government were not enough to help with all the issues that persons were facing in the communities. In addition to social work, I did mention our small business development. Yes, our jewelry, our candles, various kinds of small business development. Then, importantly, the school-based resilience program. We recognize also that in order, what they would say, you bend the tree while it is young, because it gets so much more difficult when it is an older tree. Maybe I'm speaking about myself. However, we have recognized that we need to bolster the resilience of the persons, of the young ones, the young minds. And so our community development program manager, Ms. Harris, has been quite resilient in working closely with the students across 3 primary schools to ensure that by the time they become adults, they would be more empowered. They would be more ready to take on some of the challenges that we have been facing as communities. Then COVID-19 descended on us in March 2020. And how did it impact our community development activities? Even before you look at the impact, what were the implications of COVID-19? First of all, we had the mass lockdown, which was very, very necessary for health reasons. Yes. And of course, somebody mentioned moving to the online platform. So there was a mass lockdown, then there was the social distancing, which was very important for health purposes. This resulted in a lot of isolation. And then importantly, is the isolation of the vulnerable groups that were even more serious. Yes, it was serious for all of us, but these are persons who are without help, without assistance. They were extremely impacted. And all of that put a halt on a number of, even if it did not halt, reduced significantly community development activities. But MSS is a resilient group of MSS UWI is a resilient group of young people, yes, including me. And so we continued our UWI Township Scholarship Program, our film and video production training under the KEEM project. We also had our employment internship program where we, after training the persons in the film, we placed successfully a number of them in organizations. We also continued our small business development training despite COVID. Some of it we did online, and we reduced the number of face-to-face. And we also continued our school-based resilience program throughout. We could not stop because them as well as us were all affected, what you would say, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, etc. And persons were just scared and not knowing what to do. So we had to come in with our little ones to ensure that their resilience to managing these things continue. And also, as you hear on the news every day with the escalating crime and violence in our communities, we definitely have to continue our resilience, school-based resilience program. And school-based, we focus more on the primary level, but not to leave out our youth at all. We had our youth enrichment and empowerment program that we dubbed the YEEP. And through those programs, we did a lot of activities, some of which I will just share with you in some pictures, as I'm conscious of the time. So what were the projects that we implemented during COVID from the picturesque perspective? How did we respond? We collaborated with public and private persons, stakeholders, as well as NGOs. Through the PIOJ and the CVSS, we were able to access over 450 plus some additional over 500 care packages and sanitizing equipment, which we distributed throughout communities. And importantly too, through the UWI team, the UWI alumni, they brought in the very needed adult diapers, especially for the senior citizens who bedridden, can't move. So we tried to meet every need. For the youth enrichment program, which I mentioned, we importantly, New Providence Primary benefited a whole lot. We did coding. Remember, you're moving now from the face-to-face to the online. How many persons knew how to manipulate that? So we brought some new ideas to them, which piqued their interest, the coding and the basic film training program. Then, of course, that lockdown normally spill over into gender-based violence, because now, these are persons who are sharing close quarters for, let me say, longer period than they would normally do. Now you're talking about trying to understand why people behave the way they do, etc. And that resulted in all kinds of persons not being able to tolerate each other. Unrecognizing that, and also coming over from a project that was sponsored by RISE. Thank you, RISE. During COVID, we were able to train a lot of females into how to manage and cope during this time, and how to identify, the gender-based violence and how to treat with it, and even how to convert your partners during the process. The film training I spoke about already. And then there was also online, remember May, Child Month seminars for the parents as well as the teachers. And the parents were from Kingston, a number of communities in Kingston, as well as a number of communities in Montego Bay and in our diaspora. They joined us as well and benefited from our children program. And I mentioned the parenting program. Interestingly, a number of our principals, they reached out to us to say, hey, our parents are hurting. They are not able to manage. A lot of them, they have lost jobs. They are not coping. And of course, my community development and program manager, she came on with her team, one of them being Miss Richards, who is moderating the session, and the rest of the team from Mona Social Services, UWCFP, came on, Savannah, all of them, and they are on with us now, or Rachel. We saw leaders emerging, Tina, persons who you would not have seen as leaders. They came out, they came with ideas, suggestion, EK, the team. And so because we found that even though you were say for example, the executive director at the time, because of the what do you call it now? this anonymous nature of COVID, we were blown out. So my final slide is, what were the lessons, and linking it to the theme, what were the lessons that we learned? We learned that ICT is critical to the continuation of services under any pandemic, such as COVID-19, hurricane, COVID-19 in particular, which is our experience now. We also learned that safe, low-tech solutions complement remote service delivery. Another point which we learned was that smaller is not always bad, yes? Because we had to shift from large trainings to smaller trainings. But at the same time, they were impacted and could impact others. We learned also that assessing contextual needs and fulfilling them is essential, meaning we move away from just doing things and providing the services and training that we normally do, but now looking at what we were going through to reinvent, restructure the services that we offered. And finally, we learned from all of this exercise that trust is key. Trust has always been key, but it came home to us even more because community persons reached out to us to say, these are some things that we are going through. And above everybody else, we trust you to help us to go through all that we are experiencing. So all in all, I thank you so much for listening to me on behalf of my team at the Mona Social Services and UWI Community Film Project. And now we'll take any question during the sharing session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Burke, for rounding out the presentations with that exuberance, with such exuberance. And we thank all the panelists as well for their wonderful presentations. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure that our viewers on YouTube Live have also learned. I'm going to kindly ask the panelists to give us about 15 to 24 minutes so that we can get into the discussion and wrap up. Now, here we are, the highlights of the event. It is what we are here for, to question, to discuss, and conceptualize the sustainable way forward. We have gone through 2 years of learning to cope in an environment like no other, an environment that crippled some organizations and businesses. However, there are those of us who have passed this COVID test and can now be here to share the formula. You, the panelists, members of social enterprise or leaders of social enterprise, NGOs and CSOs. And we are here to share the formula and create new formulas that should similar occurrences happen in the future. I mean, recently we see where there are areas of Beijing being shut down. We see where Europe have been having their rise, and also in America. The other day, we had reports in the region. And I've also checked the news and seen that they are now saying that it's possible for us to go through another pandemic. So it is very critical for us now to come together and share and develop each other so that we can be sustainable in the future should we have another round of this COVID pandemic, or should we face another pandemic or situation like this in the future. We must be agile. We must be proactive and not reactive. And so I'm going to ask the panelists now, it doesn't matter in which order, you can choose to start first if you wish. How has working in the pandemic changed your outlook and the strategies for your organization? Anyone can begin.
Okay, I'll begin and then the others will join. How has it changed my outlook? or our outlook, MSS's outlook, it has forced us to be to be more aware of our external environment and to be able to be flexible, to be able to respond like almost immediately, to be flexible and adaptable to the changes in order that we can still serve our communities, to also understand them and know that what we do must be in response to their needs and not to the need to just fulfilling the need of a funder or an organization.
Thanks for that, Dr. Burke. Anyone else? Miss Mitchell, Mrs. Chambers-Goss, Miss Zuniga, Mr. Pascal?
I can go. Thank you. So for the Flow Foundation, in terms of our outlook, one of the things for us is just recognizing, particularly the initiatives under our pilot program. It was the right program for the right time. We were in the pandemic by the time we got to rolling it out, and to what one of our presenters said earlier, how could we empower persons to navigate the space, do online banking, all of those things. And the program came at an opportune time, unfortunately, through a pandemic. But it came at a time when we really needed to rapidly upskill a lot of our citizens. And that in turn we saw reflected in just the numbers in terms of persons who would have subscribed to the program, wanting that opportunity to upskill themselves in the digital space. In terms of going forward, it's certainly a model we're going to be keeping. This is the space we're in. And as we are rolling out technology into more communities, we are going to ensure that we're empowering our citizens to use the space productively, ensure that they're empowered to use it safely, and of course, build a stronger and more technologically able society as we go.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Zuniga?
How COVID has impacted us at NGC and BNN, it gave us an avenue to... Sorry?
How has it changed your outlook? And
it changed our outlook because we realized we have to reach out more to our communities using technology. It also gave us a reason to create a policy for us dealing with COVID, and being that our organization is a volunteer organization. It really forced us to look at what we have and to plan better financially so we can be more sustainable without funding. Because during COVID, a lot of our funding was paused or we had to reallocate from different avenues to fund some of our programs and projects.
Okay. Mrs. Chambers-Goss and Mr. Bascom, do you have anything to add to that question? How has the pandemic changed your outlook?
But yes, thank you, Ms. Richards. So certainly for RISE, I mean, COVID was such I would say, like for everyone, it was a blessing and I don't want to say a curse, but certainly a very instructive lesson at the time. So for example, we realized that we couldn't afford to be comfortable at all in anything that we do as an NGO. And what it helped us to realize as well is that these programs that we continue to deliver during COVID, a lot of adjustments had to take place. And what was key to that was our ability to continue listening closely to what our beneficiaries needed. And so being able, for example, to engage with our youths, for example, we just had something recently called Ponder Corner session. And we had invited the observer team to be a part of that. And even though we're in programs, we don't want to think we know it all. As we prepare our proposals, we realize we can't make any assumptions. So we are more committed now to being even more closely guided by what is coming from our constituents, looking on our youth not as problems, but really that they are assets and they have so many good qualities, and that what we need to do when we're creating our projects is seeing how we can support those good qualities that they have and allow them to flourish. So that all factored into how we wish to pay even closer attention going forward to our constituents, and even internally. We recognize that we had to put a lot of emphasis on training our staff. So, for example, we would have had persons who are very skilled in delivering face-to-face training and face-to-face intervention, but that doesn't readily necessarily translate in the online space. And so we had to provide assistance to those team members who needed it, so that they had to be just as effective in the virtual space as well. And the last thing I would add on this is also just how important it is for us to collaborate. I mean, I know as NGOs sometimes, especially with a number of us operating in the same space, we think that we're competing with each other. But I'd really encourage my CSO partners to see it a bit differently, not as competition, if anything, as co-opetition, and really just to stress collaboration going forward, and how we can utilize, shared resources and skills to make sure that we continue to remain viable going forward.
Thank you, Mrs. Jacobs. That's a very important part on this collaboration. Before I move on to the next, Mr. Bascom, would you like to add to that?
Yes, well, I ended up with my presentation, I sort of went through these types of things. So as I had started off with that, the outlook was definitely to restructure things, to restructure our service mix so that we can ensure that we deliver within our means. And so what we did was kind of focus on our own mobile media productions and really look towards building long-term partnerships for our longevity. So where we are based, we partnered with an international nonprofit named CABI. We use their workspace, and we also partnered with Caribbean Media Corporation and International Federation of AGILE. So we're very much like, let's pull on the international community to put forward our work and what we're doing, because we are leading the way in it. So that's the general outlook that we had. And they're very correct. I heard one of the speakers talking about being able to pivot and how important that is to really your entity's survival in such a difficult time.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Bascom. You all have touched on some very important points, from what Miss Mitchell had said in terms of, this COVID now. And even though she had her plans or pilot the plans there, the COVID presented an opportunity where citizens should be upskilled as there's a need. So there was a change of focus there. Ms. Mitchell, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, a change of focus there in terms of how Flow conducted the usual projects and implementation.
Right, so we would have already started looking at a reset of our program in 2019. And we had designed a program around digital inclusion as well as supporting MSMEs prior to the pandemic. What we had to change, however, was the method of delivery. So initially, we would have conceptualized an approach that would entail dispatching teams into communities, building capacity in communities, almost like a train the trainer sort of concept, and then having those persons in the communities then training the other members who are interested in the program. With the impact of the pandemic, we had to go back to the drawing board to figure out how could we do this. It was not an option for us to put it on pause because the nature of the program was really required for that moment in time. So, deciding to defer until after the pandemic, would have defeated the very intent of what we were trying to accomplish. So we adjusted for our Skills for the Future program. We identified facilitators, we recruited facilitators actually. We had teachers, other professionals joining the facilitator program, going through orientation, understanding the program, and then in turn, being assigned to groups of persons who were registering for the program. And these facilitators were ensuring that they were checking in, are persons logging in, are they completing the courses that they show at the required pace? If they're not completing the program or they're not logging in, calling them, finding out what was happening. Some facilitators had WhatsApp groups, others had Zoom meetings. I've heard of Sunday afternoon sessions. I'm aware of the WhatsApp groups and so on, but Sunday afternoon after dinner, persons were joining their Zoom calls to talk about the courses in the program, helping each other. It became a full community effort, really, to support each other and progress participants in the program. So the method of delivery had to change. What I must highlight, though, is that as we are evolving out of the restrictions, we're now, we're not under those sorts of restrictions anymore. We have to adapt again. The full online learning that we were doing last year coming into this year, we have to adjust. People are going back to work. Students are now back in school, so the adults are now doing pickups, drop-offs, and so on. We have to make that shift again, which comes back to the point I made about being flexible and agile. So we are moving now to a hybrid approach where possible, to facilitate those persons and their current learning situation. So it's an ongoing adjustment for us with regard to that program. Or Training for Professionals program, however, remains fully online.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Well, the question that I asked Ms. Mitchell earlier was about the upskilling of citizens of Jamaica, because she had mentioned that Flo had this idea, and so COVID, in a sense, had provided the opportunity for them to then, I guess, put it full blast or go ahead with it. And during the pandemic, a lot of things happen, and we know about this mental health issue. Were there any deliberate thoughts or efforts towards safeguarding the physical and mental health of employees and volunteers during this time? And also, Ms. Chambers-Goss had mentioned training of staff as well to deal with the different method of delivery now, because now persons would have been used to the face-to-face as opposed to changing implementation as a result of the pandemic. So first one is were there any deliberate thoughts or efforts for safeguarding the physical and mental health of employees and volunteers? And then what about training? As Ms. Chambers-Goss had mentioned that, RISE had done training. Similarly, were there any thoughts for training of staff given their current work environment that is working in the pandemic or implementing projects in the pandemic? Karen, your mic is open. Would you like to go first? Or Dr. Burke? I see both mics are.
Okay, were there any thought or efforts given to safeguard staff's mental health?
Staff
come again?
I said staff and our volunteers. Yes.
Mental health.
Mental and physical health.
Yes, certainly. Point is, we work in volatile communities, yes, and so in order for our team members to be able to manage in the communities even prior to COVID, they had to be we had to provide the necessary training, yes? And so even the social work training that I mentioned and the grief counseling training, they went through those training. But now within the COVID, there were some other trainings that we had to provide that had to deal directly with the health issues. Just basic how you put on your mask, how you wash hands, how you sanitize, how you ensure that the social distance, that measurement 3 feet or 6 feet or whatever. And additionally, we brought on specialists in mental to train both the staff, volunteers, as well as teachers and community persons, providing the psychosocial training, because we all were suffering from mental fatigue, from overuse, even of overuse of the online platform. We had to train our staff as well as volunteers in how to now be creative in utilizing the online platform in order that they can keep the persons who were now the recipients of the training engaged. We recognize also that we had to be flexible in the sense that our training became a family kind of training, because it was one device that was being used for within the various family members. So you came up with some form of activities and such, even in with the children and stuff. You came up with we came up with train the persons to come up with activities that would that would involve all the persons. The social work, sociology, psychology, and social work unit on the campus, especially social work unit, provided a lot of support in assisting with the mental health of our staff and volunteers.
My apologies. I was saying thank you, Dr. Burke, for responding. I was asking if any other member of the panelists could add to that, wants to add to that. Okay. All right, so we have established that most of the activities, projects, etc., would have taken place via online engagement. So do you think it was effective? Do you think it was engaging? What were the participants' response to engaging in the activities online, if any?
Okay, can I just give some quick feedback before I go?
Sure, thanks.
All right, so when it comes to the online aspect, a lot of people do not realize there's a particular art to going online. Going and just having a Zoom or what have you, whatever is the next regular thing, Microsoft Teams or what have you. Just going on it and going live or just having a meeting on there. That's not how it works. You still have to communicate. You still have to manage the environment of the room. You still have to ensure you pull your data, run your polls, achieve whatever objectives you set out, engage your audience. It's a lot, and there's an art to it. And this is something that people didn't realize and had to learn the hard way, especially, for example, our teachers, who suddenly had to just develop digital skills. I don't know how it was in Jamaica, but here in Trinidad and Tobago, I have spoken to teachers who just didn't have digital skills at all. They were given 1 or 2 weeks worth of training and then just told to do it. And that's something you have to build. You have to be accustomed and familiar with the tools and the actual use of the technology, having those multitasking skills and the ability to keep calm under pressure and manage a lot of things at once. It's not for everyone, and the teachers were not prepared for it. And as a result, you have this low level of online education, or rather you would say that the COVID sort of revealed that the education sector has a lot of problems with it, primarily being very archaic. So that means that with the excessive online, you had a lot of fatigue with the young people. And on top of that, you still have people who just flat out refuse to touch a computer. They would use a phone, they would use a tablet, but they wouldn't touch a computer. And it's like, even then, if it's like they're still limited in what skills they have. So that's all of these things were some of the realities that people need to face if we are to move things forward and make technology be of benefit to us and to all our targeted beneficiaries for our different organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Bascom, for your...
Shada, may I add that as simple as it is, we also had to do some training in how to access the Zoom platform, how to use Zoom platform and the Google Suite, because we were being asked to do these things, not knowing how to do them ourselves. And so we too had to train staff and volunteers to do that, as simple as it sounds.
Ms. Cass?
Okay.
Being with us.
You're welcome. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Richards. What I wanted to share was that it was a bit mixed for us, and mixed in the sense that we had to deliver sessions to various groups online. So for example, if we were targeting, say, the guidance counselors who were very interested in the content that we were sharing, they would make a very deliberate effort to stay engaged with the facilitator. And, if there were any issues, then they would, technical issues, they would try together to kind of resolve them online. No, it was very different when we were working with the school age, the students, because then, of course, you have to deal with, well, first for us to come up to speed very quickly in terms of some of those things that Mr. Bascom would have just mentioned, that those various skills in terms of breaking up the sessions, in terms of having different polls, different things to keep them interested and making sure it's not too long, in terms of making sure we had videos available. And still then you had to be mindful that their attention span was just, it was going to go so far and then no more. So some of them as well, we also had to contend with the fact that they were in places where they didn't really have either very good internet service, or a number of them didn't really have access to devices. And so whereas had it been, say, face-to-face and we had gone into the schools, we would have been more certain of reaching a larger number of the students. With the online environment, there were times when our numbers dropped significantly from what even the class size should have been, because those students, either the internet was giving issues on that day, or there's a challenge with the device, so they just couldn't log on. And the other thing that was a little mixed for us as well was in terms of the counseling services that we would deliver. So for example, depending on the issue that the person was presenting with, of course, face-to-face would have been more ideal. Whereas for some persons, they actually did better in that virtual environment, because for them, they needed a little more space, a little more distance. And so the online environment gave them that extra coating of, I feel safe, I'm here in my house, I feel more comfortable now interacting with the counselor. So from that perspective, with those different populations, the online engagement was a bit of a mixed bag. But of course, in terms of our team, we generally did prefer the online, especially for the counseling segments and working with the youths. But as I said, we had to come up to speed very quickly, and now we're able to embrace and better work with whatever it is that we're dealing with in terms of how our participants engage with us online.
Thank you. And Ms. Zuniga, could you share the perspective from the Belize NGOs. How was it working online? What was the response like from the participants?
Working online, with both NGOs, we had more participants online versus face-to-face because it was more accessible for them. And being online, they were able to be multitasking. So it was very beneficial for us. We were able to do much more in terms of engagement with our communities and with the public. Instead of holding forums for smaller groups, we were able to engage them on Facebook, which calls for more people to be in tune with what was going on.
Okay, great. And Miss Mitchell, I know you at Flow would have, the upskilling and the certification. However, were there any issues with persons getting on, understanding, doing the courses online, or was it just flowing for you all?
No, it was not just flowing. I wish I could say it was, but it was not. The challenges that our other panelists would have mentioned, and I also mentioned them in my presentation, it's true right across the board when you think of that virtual environment. Different competency levels, persons coming in. At one point, we had to pause our intake because we had persons applying for the training for professionals program, for example, and they had very little online experience in terms of how to navigate online. So we had to, put some additional layers in that process to do some more comprehensive evaluations to ensure that while we want to provide you with the training, we have to ensure that you will be able to move through the course without struggling. So for some of those persons, we moved them into the Skills for the Future program, which would have brought them up to speed. And then we've had quite a few persons who have moved out of that program into the Training for Professionals program. So it's been a constant case of evaluating and adjusting to ensure that we are putting in place the right support for persons as they complete the program. So it was not totally smooth. So there's the competency level, there's the device challenge, which I mentioned earlier in terms of limited devices in a household and persons needing it for work, for school, and then at whatever point they find the window to do the study, the online learning. And in some of those instances, through our tablet distribution program, we would have supported students across the country, but we can't hand out enough tablets, in all honesty. We still have work to do. And then there is access. We're in the business of providing internet access, and while we would have invested significantly, over 300 million since January 2020 to expand our fiber network, moving into over 500 communities, passing around 170,000 homes, we still have persons who had access challenges. And it's not necessarily, I should add that it's not necessarily a case of not having access to the internet. There is also the challenge of being able to afford it. When you are looking at your income and you have to prioritize, it's not that you don't want it. The network is right outside your gate. We just need you to apply so we can bring it into your home. But we found that for some persons, that was a challenge, which is why the layer that we had on top of that in terms of free community Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi in the schools, connectivity in the schools, central community facilities that persons could access without any cost. That was also important to help to support our program as well as others that were on the way in this space.
All right, thank you, Miss Mitchell. I'm sure they appreciated that community hotspot. I would appreciate it right now. We touched on funding. I think it was Miss Zuniga who touched on funding being paused. Miss Mitchell, I don't know how it is with you and Flow Foundation, but for MSS and yourself, you can let us know how funding is for you if you had any issues with that. But how has funding been? Has funding been paused? Has there been any issues getting funding from the agencies, the delay? What creative options have you had to take if there were no funding or if paused?
All right, so funding for us is a little bit different. So I'll go very quickly. Our pilot program was funded by our parent foundation, or Cable and Wireless Charitable Foundation. It's to the tune of over 50, 60 million that we're investing in our programs. And that came through, let's roll out this program, let's see how it performs, and then we will determine the way forward and the additional investment after that. So for the digital training program, which is free to participants and so on, connectivity that we're rolling out and that sort of a thing, that's all being funded under our pilot program, which ends later this year, by the way. So we're going to have to determine the path after that. Additionally, we do get some funding from our business, Flow Jamaica, which then supports our initiatives like the tablet distribution partnership, the Internet in Schools program, and so on. But that is not a sustainable model for the work that we want to do. And that's just a fact. We have to move into a more sustainable model. We have to engage with the agencies and those global donors and partners. And it has been a challenging time because a lot of the focus has been on post-pandemic recovery. So during the pandemic, it was about getting aid into different spaces, persons donating masks and other things like that required to support communities as we went through the pandemic. The focus was not necessarily on digital learning and digital inclusion, even though the pandemic accelerated the pace at which we have to move through that sort of training. Where we are now, as we're moving more into recovery, we are not necessarily seeing that opening up in our space, which is digital learning, digital inclusion. We are hopeful that more agencies will open up their coffers and their funding to include this sort of focus, because it is required. These are the skills that are required for the future. We're not going back to where we were. And we have the proof that there is a demand for this sort of learning and the evidence that persons are completing and moving into other things that enable their progress. So that we are hopeful that as we move into that space, we will see some investments coming through as we seek to work together to build a stronger and technologically and digitally enabled people.
My mic was on mute, sorry. Thank you for that, Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Chambers-Goss, how has it been for you with funding? By the way, Ms. Zuniga has to step out, so we thank her for joining us. I would have loved to hear the Belizean perspective re the funding. But Ms. Goss?
Sure. Well, funding for us, well, as you can imagine, we, as I had also mentioned before, get funding from a variety of sources, from the government sector to donor agencies to private sector individuals as well. So whereas from the donor community, so for example, some of the projects that we would have initiated prior to COVID would have run for a set period, and so those budgets were fixed. So there wasn't much in terms of loss there in terms of funding support, because the projects that we wanted to pursue and had gotten from donors already had those budget support in place. Where we had to get very creative now was recognizing that, for example, the government and our private sector partners would have felt the pinch significantly from the COVID fallout. So in terms of places that we could turn to get that additional financial support that we needed to implement some of those programs, we couldn't do that anymore, because then persons were focused on, first of all, them being able to stay in business and being able to also pay their employees. And a number of them had been confronted with, we have to lay off staff or we have to cut hours. And so, yes, it did become a little bit more challenging for the CSO sector, not just RISE, but in terms of accessing now that kind of additional funding support from especially our private sector partners. What that did though was really force us to become a little bit more creative and to look a bit broader in terms of potential sources for income. So I can remember Karan saying, for example, through COVID, it actually helped him and his agency to become more independent because they were actively now online looking for new partners, looking for new donors. And it was the same within RISE as well. We actually broadened, invested in having a particular tool to use that we could try and identify funding opportunities, more funding opportunities, and for more diverse funding agencies or funding sources. And we also had to get even more creative in terms of when we were approaching companies, it wasn't just to approach them for financial aid, but to make sure that we were offering something tangible to them in return. So, it became a good partnership, became a win-win then for them to divert funds into RISE's programs. And so that really helped us. And honestly, I would say that that is something I would not want to change from the COVID experience. That was really good that we were forced to find these additional sources of funding and then to look internally as well to see what we had, what skills and expertise we have in-house that we can then look to monetize. So for example, and it might not be right now, but I know for RISE internally, we're looking at how we can monetize, for example, our project management skills or financial management skills, not just for NGOs here in Jamaica, but we're also thinking of for the region as well. And also in terms of the knowledge products that we would have created, how can we capitalize and monetize on those as well as additional streams then of revenue going forward?
All right, thank you, Ms. Goss. Dr. Burke, and if you want to take that question before I ask the final question and end.
Services USCFE, I must say that it has impacted us in different ways. First of all, the organization is funded by the University of the West Indies, yes? Largely, I must say largely funded by that. Yes, we also get grants from different sources. But once the university experiences financial difficulties, and it was indeed in the news many times, then it would naturally affect us. So some of our programs that were funded by UWI, we definitely had to curtail, not eliminate, but reduced. For example, our scholarship program, we did not eliminate it, but we had to reduce it by 50%. But at the same time, persons were able to still benefit. During COVID, we, interestingly, in addition to those persons who were funding us before COVID, we did get some new persons during COVID. For example, KEEM, we had the Kingston Harbor. It's an environmental project through and they funded us pretty handsomely during COVID, and a number of persons were impacted. We also had a research institution that funded us because it was important to get some findings now. How are our students being impacted by way of COVID? So they funded that. We received more, I think, in kind than we did in cash. Some of our funders, like I will not mention, but some of our funders, I believe they, while we significantly appreciated a lot what they did, I don't think they were being as responsive to what some of us who they funded were experiencing the challenges that we were experiencing with the persons who we were to serve. And so we were indeed put under some pressure that had had this staff going almost crazy. So sometimes, as much as it is very, very good to access these kinds of funding, the pressure that you undergo when they are not willing to pivot with what was going on caused us severe strain, and also caused us not to be able to reach as many persons as we would have wanted to. But new partners, I said, came on board. We could not have provided the amount of care packaging, etc., that we did if it were not for like CVSS, PIOJ's contribution. And then I will continue to mention RISE, who is online. Yes, they funded our women, our women gender-based violence women project during that time, and that was very, very, very necessary and needed during that time. We continue to experience financial challenges, yes, because a lot of funds were diverted in other areas, yeah, and so persons who we would have reached out to, they too had redirected their funds. So we are in the process of not only had to, but continuously looking at our funding streams and being very creative now in how we look at funding going forward, because widen our pool of prospects and collaborators and partners going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Burke, for that. I hope there are some funders online if they haven't gone offline. Hearing that. A final question for panelists, just do a round robin. What recommendations would you give to organizations moving forward, especially as it relates to being more sustainable in a time as this, in an environment like this? Ms. Mitchell, would you like to start that one?
Sure. I can start. You know, sustainability is the way forward. Let me just say that. Gone are the days when you're seeing foundations and NGOs just implementing programs at the drop of a hat, and blink and you missed it. Mm-hmm. More of us in this space are focused on programs that have impact, programs that bring about positive change, and programs that are sustainable. One of the key things, certainly for us at the Flow Foundation, is collaboration. We recognize that we can't do it alone. We have to have partnerships. We have to engage with other persons, other entities in the space, because together we are stronger. We can have a greater impact when we work together than rolling out our individual programs. The other thing for us is measurements. When you are speaking to persons who may have an interest in funding a particular program, you have to have your results. That is what inspires confidence. So you have to ensure that when you are putting together the focus of your program, the goals and the objectives, that you build in some KPIs, some key performance indicators that you are going to track, that you're going to hold yourself accountable to, and that at the end of the day, as you are continuously monitoring and measuring, you can state where you are in terms of how many persons you are reaching, what are you having the desired impact, and you can adjust accordingly, because that informs your overall strategy and program. So those are the two that I would highlight. There are others, but I will just share those as two key things to bear in mind when considering sustainability.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Chambers-Goss?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Richards. Well, actually, for sustainability, Ms. Mitchell was so right. We really do need to think first in terms of making sure that we're relevant, and a part of that relevance is always geared to the data, the evidence that we're using. That requires us to be, as I mentioned before, just more inclined to listen carefully so that we do continue to shape programs that actually address the real needs of the people we serve. And of course, it's also to operate on a basis that we are as transparent as possible with our partners. We have to be able to show them what we're doing with the funding that we get. We have to be able to demonstrate quite easily, again, through how we manage our data, the information that we gather, that through the projects that we're delivering, we're actually making an impact. It's making a difference in people's lives, because that is really what is going to drive our ability to be able to get funding. Also, again, speaking towards sustainability, we have to look more carefully at ourselves, at NGOs, to see how we can better evolve. What can we do more efficiently? What kind of additional services can we put out there? How can we capitalize on our skills? How can we build greater partnerships so that we have that kind of built-in resilience, that built-in agility whenever we're confronted? It may not be COVID, it could be by something else not too far down the road, who knows? But certainly that we would have taken the lessons from COVID with, the need to be more technologically up to date and ready to do what we need to do to deliver our programs through different needs as well, through our partners.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Goss. Dr. Burke, before we...
Well, as whatever happens in the global space, it impacts us directly. And keeping our eyes on the global environment, it also implies that we are to be flexible, creative, and innovative in how we plan our initiatives and program. And also, not only in terms of the initiatives and program, but even in terms of our own workspace, be more dynamic in how we arrange those workspace. The hybrid workplace, the hybrid training, we have to keep that going. I also believe in upscaling significantly the use of the technology. You're talking about the metaverse and all of those things. We have to be a part of that, which has a lot to do with the technology. Persons talking about the new environment, and yet I see we're going back a lot to the old environment. Where are we going? We need to be able to ensure that the trainings that we are imparting to our community, that they are relevant, relevant. So I want to join my colleagues in talking about measuring, yes, doing the measuring to see the impact that those programs are having on our communities, despite the fact that we are getting the funding, to ensure that at the end of the day, they make useful sense to grow our community within this and to achieve both the Vision 2030 and sustainable development. So definitely keep an eye on the global environment, definitely be flexible and creative innovation, definitely upskill our technological outlook on what we do, measuring what we do towards achieving this whole one picture that we're all working towards. Continuous relevance in capacity building of ourselves and our communities.
Thank you, Dr. Burke. All right, guys, so there we have it, our sustainable ways, collaborating, measuring what it is that we are doing, ensuring that we pay attention to the results, the global environment, as well as upskilling in technology and staying flexible. I want to thank you all for being with us this long. We cannot take any questions from the YouTube live or address them because we're way beyond time. And so I'll ask Miss Savannah Perido, our business manager here at Mona Social Services and UWI Community Film Project, to give the vote of thanks.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Thank you so much, Shada. You've said thank you so many times. I think you've already given the vote of thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we've already gone over the time, so I'll just be brief. I'd just like to thank all the panelists who took the time to make presentations and to educate us today. This pandemic has affected all of us, and the conversations like these are important so that we can learn ways to cope, overcome, and move forward, which is where we're trying to be right now. So Dr. Olivine Burke, Mrs. Keon Mitchell, Mrs. Nadine Chambers-Goss, Mr. Caron Bascom, and last but definitely not least, Ms. Sheena Zuniga, we thank you. A big thank you as well to the MSS UWI team that organized the event, Ms. Shada Richards, who's also our moderator. Thank you so much, Ms. Angela Harris, and of course, Akeem Lee, who's our technical manager, and everyone else who played a part in organizing this event. Finally, we'd like to say a big thank you to all the guests who joined us today. Thank you so much for being here. We know that you could have been anywhere else. Thank you for joining us. For everyone who participated, thank you for your contribution, and I hope that everyone will enjoy the rest of the day.
All right, thanks for that, Savannah. I'm not going to say any more thank yous because I've said enough. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. And we hope that next year we'll have a bigger, better symposium where we can have more sharing and we'll allocate more time. Have a great evening.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.